Hi. I'm so excited to see who we got on. Oh, hi. It's nice to see some familiar names and some unfamiliar names. All right. So, for the people who already know me, you know how this is going to go down. We've literally got a half an hour session today. So, it's going to be a short one, but that's okay. We can still learn a lot. Now, can somebody write to me if you can hear me? If you can hear me, just write into the chat box. Yes, I can hear you. As you know, my microphone sometimes decides not to work. So can you hear me? Awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, so what we're going to do is I am going to go through a presentation. I'm going to share my screen and I am going to give you some practical advice. But please ask me questions. If you've got a question, then put up your hand or write it into the chat box. Do not write your questions into the Q&A because for some reason when I'm sharing my screen, I can't access the stuff in the Q&A. I don't know why. Basically, it's either Zoom or it's somebody. Basically, somebody's against me doing that. Okay, no, this is not what we are doing. 1 second. So, for many of you who know me, you already have seen this slide before, but I know that this isn't just a members webinar, this is for other people too. So, some of you don't know me. So, I don't run a recruitment agency for developers. I don't, I'm not going to be selling you developers. So, I'm not like my incentive is your knowledge. So, if you I'm not representing any product teams. I'm representing myself and my knowledge. And if you like it, then you can buy various products from me. But what I'm telling you is it's not because a product team has paid me to do it. Okay, so I am a non-technical founder myself. So I used to work in the media, then I worked in private equity, which is a type of finance in London. And then I went to get my MBA at Chicago Booth, which is basically no, it's consistently ranked as the global #1 business school by The Economist and Business Week and various other places. And I thought that that was going to be enough for me to start a tech-enabled business. It was not. I think business schools in general are doing a big disservice to people because they're teaching people to work in consulting and in banking, and they're not helping non-technical smart professionals to basically work in tech, which is the area where all the growth is. So anyway, whatever. So as a non-technical founder, I had to learn how to hire product teams. I had to learn how to go from idea to app to site to algorithm. Tech for Non-Techies didn't exist because, well, I created it based on my knowledge, so it didn't exist. There are all these courses on how to become a developer. There weren't any courses on how to work with people who are developers. So I started writing about it. I started essentially sharing knowledge in Forbes and the FT and the Guardian, etc., etc. And that's how Tech for Non-Techies was born. Some of you have come through the podcast. For those of you who don't know, there is a podcast. It's called Tech for Non-Techies. It's on Apple and on Spotify. And if what I'm saying to you sounds useful and relevant, then listen to the podcast. It's free. Speaking of, we literally have half an hour today, and I have to cover quite a lot of ground. It's not going to be possible that I give you all of my knowledge in this session, but I have written an ebook literally called How to Hire Your Product Team, a guide for non-technical founders. It is on the Tech for Non-Techies website, and you will also get a link to it. So don't panic if like you don't get everything. It's and it's not expensive at all. So let's go. Let's do this. So I want to make sure that we know what we're talking about when we're talking about the kind of business that we want to found, because I'm going to give you advice for tech-enabled businesses, not for deep tech businesses, because they are different. And because we're in a class, I want to know, does anybody want to volunteer to give me a difference between deep tech and tech enabled? I know some of you are my students already, so some of you might know this. If you want to volunteer a difference, just put it into the chat box or raise your hand. Okay, guys, I'm going to move on really quickly just because we don't have time. I'm going to put you out of your misery and tell you. basically, and you know this, deep tech is where the thing that you sell, the main thing that you create, like the thing you get paid for is basically technology. So many of you would know the company DeepMind. DeepMind is deep tech. It is an AI company that's ran in the UK. It's basically artificial intelligence, and it's really deep and very good artificial intelligence, and that's what they sell. So literally, this company creates very smart algorithms. It uses those algorithms to analyze lots and lots of data and to make predictions. And so big companies with lots and lots of data will go to them and essentially become their clients. Google bought DeepMind because Google is a tech company that has lots and lots of data. So DeepMind is working on Google, on solving Google's problems and on Google's clients' problems. So DeepMind is founded by somebody who is a computer scientist. And I mean, I've even met product managers there and people who generally who have jobs that don't seem to be very technical, but because they're in DeepMind, even the less technical jobs are often occupied by people who have at least a BA in BS rather, in computer science. So that is deep tech. If you want to work in deep tech, I'm going to tell you, don't listen to what I say to you, because this is not my audience. I know deep tech companies, deep tech companies are still businesses. They still have business fundamentals, but this deep tech is not in the Tech for Non-Techies realm. What is in the Tech for Non-Techies realm are tech-enabled businesses. And tech-enabled businesses are basically where what you're aiming to do, so what you're aiming to sell is not technology, it's something else, but technology helps you achieve that particular goal. So does anybody, if you want to give me an example and share an example, then tell me, but I'm going to give you a couple of examples of people that we've had on Tech for Non-Techies. So for those of you who don't know Tech for Non-Techies yet, so there is a podcast. We also have a weekly class, which is open to the membership. So you have to become a member, and that's on Tuesdays. And we also have a non-technical founders course, and the next enrollment is going to be in March. So currently, there's a current enrollment happening right now. The next one's due in March. Right. So the next couple of people have spoken at our classes, and you can hear excerpts of what they said on the podcast. So the first one, my students will recognize her. She is utterly fabulous. I'm a big fan. So her name is Robin Exon. She began her career in branding, so definitely a non-technical founder. And now she runs basically a Tinder for lesbians. So it is the dating community for queer women. It's got 5 million users. She is an alumna of the most prestigious tech accelerator in the world. So Airbnb came out of there, Dropbox came out of there, and her company came out of there. And she's a non-technical founder. And literally, even though she is in Silicon Valley, she's had all the Silicon Valley success. She's actually British. You can listen to her podcast and you can watch the full session with her if you remember. She didn't have a CTO from the start. She didn't have a technical background. She did try to do some coding, but literally she just took a few coding courses like for a day. She didn't completely retrain. And yet she has built her company and she didn't have a technical co-founder. So I'm telling you this because I think it's important to get inspired. Another person that we've had on, again, you can hear an excerpt of her session. So our classes are an hour long and you can actually ask these people your questions and get feedback from them. Whereas in the podcast, you get about 15, 20 minutes of just a recording. So obviously you can't interact with the recording, but you do get the director's cut. So this is Alexandra. She is based in New York. She's a non-technical founder, and she created a company that basically works with the travel sector. So they make a software for the travel sector, but the software itself is quite simple. I believe what they're doing is basically they're helping travel companies make bookings. So the software itself is very, very simple. They have raised 28 million to date. She has never had a technical co-founder. So there are 3 co-founders at Triptease. None of them are technical, and they still use an outsourced product team. And she's also on the board of a NASDAQ company. So this is a person who is very successful in technology, who has built a company that, before the pandemic was like flying. I think they've had some issues, but which travel company hasn't? And she's definitely, absolutely loved by venture capitalists. And she has used outsourced product teams. Now, I'm telling you this about outsourced product teams because there is a traditional view from some VCs, especially some Silicon Valley people, that you must have a CTO right from the start. That's a chief technology officer. You must have a technical co-founder right from the start, and you must not outsource. Now, this person that I've showed you, she has literally done all of these things. She still doesn't have a technical co-founder. She is not a technical co-founder herself. She's outsourced, and yet things seem to be going okay. So what I want you to know that if you're building a tech-enabled business where the thing you are selling is being helped by technology rather than you're selling the technology itself, then outsourcing is perfectly fine. Not having a technical co-founder is also perfectly fine. So I would say if you can have a technical co-founder, amazing, that can help you. But if you can't find one, it's fine. Outsourcing, I think, on the other hand, is actually often better, and I'll explain why. So also, you will get some investors pushing back against this, and that's totally fine. That just means that that's not the investor for you. But there are lots of investors, $28 million worth of investors who think this is totally fine and are very happy to fund companies like this. So just because some investors don't want to fund outsourcing teams, we've got plenty of examples on Tech For Non-Techies of successful non-technical founders who have used outsourced product teams and have raised lots and lots of money and have built successful companies. Okay, so I know my students are going to be like, oh my God, we've seen this so many times, but you're not the only people on this, so be patient. Okay, what you need to know is you do need to learn some skills if you're going to be working with product teams. You need to learn some concepts, not skills. So you need to understand some basic concepts of what happens on a product team, what a product is, who you hire first, how you work with them. But you don't need skills. By skills, I mean, you don't need to make the thing yourself. So you don't need to become a coder. You don't need to, take a 6-month coding course. You don't need to take a product management course. You just need to learn how to work with people who make the things so you can be a successful co-creator. So essentially, this is what we go into in the non-technical founders course. We have a free session, which is a kind of a free class about introducing the key concepts, which is going to happen in March. If you're on this session right now, you will get a notification about the next free class. And then if you're interested in the course, you can sign up to the course. It's a 5-week thing. Right now, I don't have the time to go into all of this, but what you need to understand is technical products are built in a very different way to traditional products. Traditional products go in a linear way from idea to creation. What I mean is that they don't have a feedback loop. If you have an idea for something and then you make it, whether it's a car or a pen or a chair, once that thing is sold, that thing leaves you and you basically never see it again. Whereas with a technical product, you make the thing, you get it out to people, people use it. So for example, any app you have on your phone, that's already a created product, and your user behavior is constantly being monitored. And that's why the app keeps on changing without you doing anything. So literally I know this might be going, for some of you, this might be going over your head. It's fine. This is actually quite a complicated concept. So don't freak out too much. Again, if you want to go a bit deeper, you can get the book and see how how that goes for you. All right, so basically this is the production process that I've just talked about for technical product. You see how it's circular. So literally you go from concept, so you have an idea for something. As a non-technical founder, you have an idea for something. The next set of people you're going to work with after you've had your idea are going to be designers. This is absolutely crucial because a lot of people, and by the way, myself included, a lot of non-technical founders, we get so freaked out by the fact that we're not technical. We get so nervous about the fact that we're not technical, that we basically go from concept straight to the development stage, and we start hunting for CTOs. We start hunting for co-founders. We start hunting for developers. I think that is driven because we've all been reading TechCrunch, and we've all been, kind of inundated with this myth that is going to be usually a couple of white dudes sitting in a garage coding something, and then poof, they're billionaires. And like that has happened to some people. So, it's not like we're completely irrational and insane. That has happened to some people, and that's what podcasts like the Masters of Scale tell us about. But that is not the only way to do things. And if you're a non-technical person, you don't have to go and hire your CTO or look for these people. What you do 100% need is to go from concept to number 3, you need number 2, which is design. So the first thing you need to work with are user experience designers. So don't even look in the direction of developers before you work with a user experience designer. So this is for apps and for sites. For algorithms, it's slightly different because if you're designing an algorithm, which is a non-technical founder, you really can do. So we recently had a class with a non-technical founder who created an AI company and basically created algorithms. So it is perfectly possible. For algorithms, if you're just making algorithms, you don't need a designer. But if you're making an app or a site, the first thing you do is you go from concept to design. So your first hires are designers. Only when your design is created and tested and you have product specifications and you've tested your prototype, then you will work with developers, and there you'll have a front-end developer and a back-end developer. Then you will release your thing, your app or your site. You'll get some people to use it. And then you have to analyze their behavior to essentially improve the product. I know, again, this might be going over your head, but literally I'm literally like teaching you a business school course in 5 minutes. And by the way, I have taught this at London Business School. So if you're not getting an entire business school course in 5 minutes, it's not your fault. It's just because there's a lot. So what you need to know when you're hiring product teams or when you're starting to work with technical professionals, you don't need to understand what code they're using. You don't need to tell them what code to use. You just need to understand who does what. So you need to understand, okay, a front-end developer does this. What is a front end? Okay, that's why it matters. What does a designer do? Okay, why does it have to be UX designer? What's a UX designer as opposed to a UI designer? Okay, so what is the process of work? Who do I work with first? And this isn't, just a technical thing. It's, imagine if, I don't know, you were having your house rebuilt. You would need to figure out, okay, what kind of professionals do I need to get my bathroom redone? So there'll probably be a plumber, there'll be an electrician, there might be a painter and decorator. So you don't need to go and do the plumbing yourself, but you do need to understand, okay, that there are these different types of professions. And if you're going to go from, idea to your ideal bathroom, you might need to probably work with the plumber first, and then the electrician, and then at the end of it, there'll be the painter and decorator. It's the same kind of thing. You just need to understand who are the professionals involved, what order they do it in, and I've just given you the order, that's that circular thing. And then you need to understand how to work with them effectively. So you need to know how to set them the right tasks, and you need to understand how to essentially make sure that they are following the vision that you want them to follow. So those are product specifications documents. Those are essentially giving them a product metric. You need to give a team a product metric. But I still haven't even told you what kind of team you want to be hiring, which is really, really important. So this is your basic tech team, but do not freak out. The people you need, like 100%, are the designer, the backend developer, and the front-end developer. And I'm talking about apps and sites. As I said, for an algorithm, you don't need a designer and you don't need a front-end developer. But most people who are making tech-enabled businesses, they want a website or they want an app, which basically means you need to have these 3 different jobs being done. Now, I have these other jobs here because people ask me about them. And you do need some of these jobs being done, but some of these jobs can be done by the same person. Okay, so you 100% need a designer. The designer can also often be the person who does the analysis of your product. Remember, we said that in our technical production process, in that circular process, once your product is released, we need to see how people use it, so then we can make it better. So how people use it is partially where do they click, where do they swipe, where do they clearly get confused? And that's basically how do they use the design. So a designer or a front-end developer can often be your product analyst. So you don't necessarily need a product analyst. You do need a back-end developer and a front-end developer because they are just different jobs. You do need these to be done. You don't need a data scientist from the start unless you are building a data company right from the start. Most non-technical founders are not. To have a lot of data, to be a data scientist, to make good use of a data scientist, you need a lot of data. If you don't have a lot of data, there's no point of having a data scientist. Okay, but what about CTOs? I can hear you screaming at me. Okay, we've already gone through this. Fantastic. So you do not need to have a technical co-founder or a CTO from the start. Literally, on Tech For Non-Techies, as some of you who are members, you will know that a lot of the people that we have welcomed, a lot of people we've spoken to, and if you listen to the podcast, you'll just see a lot of successful examples of non-technical founders who don't have a CTO from the start. Some of them still don't have a CTO. Okay, so the reason why I'm telling you this is finding a CTO co-founder or finding any kind of co-founder is actually really, really hard because essentially you are trying to find somebody for a very tricky, difficult relationship with you. So you're looking for somebody who is going to work really hard with you, who is going to be there in the trenches when things get really tough. You probably won't get paid at the beginning. So, this person is going to have to forego salary for a bit and work really hard on a venture that, might not work out. So, and on top of all of that, you have to get along. And on top of all of that, they also have to be really good at their job. So this is actually really, really hard to find, the person who fits all of that criteria and who wants to do this with you. Especially, when you're no longer like 22 and people have mortgages and responsibilities, this is just going to be really, really hard. So whilst the Silicon Valley folklore tells us that we have to do it, in reality, when you dig a bit deeper, this is actually not what's happening in the market right now. So if you're building a tech-enabled business, you don't need that. If you're building a deep tech business, well, generally it's developers who build deep tech businesses. So if you want to build a deep tech business, honestly, this webinar is not for you. If you want to build a tech-enabled business, you need a tech lead or a technical advisor. I would say you do need that, but that is so much easier to get. That's what I've had, and honestly, it's way easier. So what's a technical lead or technical advisor? So basically, okay, even if you take my course and even if I teach you everything that I know, it's going to be enough for you to be a good product manager. It's going to be enough for you to raise money and to go from idea to product. That is true. But in order for you to communicate successfully with your developers, you are still going to need a bit of help, which, I'm not going to be able to give you. So, but you don't necessarily need a CTO. What you need is somebody who is going to give you some steering and explain some concepts and help you make some hires and occasionally interview somebody and answer some technical questions. But given what you're going to be doing and given that you're going to be working with a product team, you don't actually need a CTO working there with you full time. So you just need somebody who is going to have a conversation with you, over lunch when we can meet up in person or over Zoom every couple of weeks. And that technical lead, they do need to have a technical background. They actually do need to be some kind of developer. And you don't need to force them to leave their jobs to work with you. So literally the person that was working with me, they're one of the most senior developers at Facebook. So literally very useful connection. I learned a lot about how a big successful tech company works, but I didn't need his level of basically tech genius to help me build an app. I just needed him to help to steer me in the right direction. Having somebody to advise you every couple of weeks over lunch is a much easier sell than getting that same person to leave their job where they're getting paid millions to, sit with you in your kitchen at your IKEA table. So get a tech lead or a technical advisor. Don't stress about having a CTO. Okay, so hiring versus outsourcing. This should be a plus. This is a slip. Okay, in general, I would say tech-enabled businesses, outsourcing is a good thing. It's not just you don't know how to make hires, so it's scary, so don't do it because you can't do it. No. Okay, one of the very useful things about outsourcing is that at the beginning, you don't know how your technology is going to change and you don't know what your technology is going to be like. You don't know what technology you need. So if you hire a person, we are all humans, we are all limited by what we know. So for example, I speak 3 languages, that's pretty good, but there are lots of, I don't speak the majority of languages in the world. So that means that whoever I work with, we're going to be limited by the 3 languages that I do speak. So equally is the same with developers. If you make a full-time hire of developers and they know how to code in a particular way, if you then decide to take your product in a different direction, if you realize that actually your users would benefit from a different type of product than what you initially thought, you're probably going to have to fire that person, which is really painful and expensive. And also, you might have to fire that person literally 2 months after you've hired them. Now, that's an expensive process and it's a painful process. If you're outsourcing, that's not your problem. An outsourced team is going to have a bunch of specialists that you can draw from. Okay, so last thing, I know we've about to run over. Okay, so this is important. There are 3 types of outsource hires that you can make. And I would say only one of them for you is safe. Now, you can hire freelancers, but I would say that, and by the way, freelancers, that means on that you could go on things like Upwork, which I do not recommend don't do that. I know some people who've done that and it has worked for them, but I know more people who've done that and they've lost their money. So I've had bad experiences on Upwork. I know people who've had bad experiences on Upwork. In general, if you're a non-technical person and you're hiring developers through the internet, if you're hiring people who don't come to you with personal recommendations to do jobs that you can't check, the likelihood of you getting screwed is very, very high, or just the likelihood of you not being able to set the task properly is also very high. So either you might meet somebody unscrupulous, or you don't know what you're doing and you won't be able to work with them effectively. So freelancers generally don't do it. The other option, and by the way, I go through all of this in the ebook, so there's way more information, and then I actually give you examples of the kind of firms that either I recommend or other non-technical founders who have been on Tech For Non-Techies that they recommend. So another option that you can work with are development shops. So they're often called dev shops. So it's literally just a team of developers for hire. So they're usually going to be back-end developers and front-end developers. And what they do is they write code. Again, for non-technical founders, non-technical people, I don't recommend that you work with development shops, because unless you know how to supervise developers, which you don't because you're here on this session, then if you just get lots of developers, you're essentially going to be facing some of the same issues here. Okay, even if it's a very reputable development shop, if you don't know how to work with developers yourself, if you don't know how to set developers tasks, then it's very likely that things are going to go wrong. Because as we said, you need to have much more than just developers. You also need to have designers, you also need to have analysts, and you also need to bring it all together. So you need some kind of project management situation going on. So the best thing for non-technical founders are product studios. So this is what I recommend you do. So if you are looking for, basically, if you want to hire a team, I would suggest just get the ebook. It's literally $20, which I think in pounds is like 14 pounds. So in the context of what this is going to cost you, it's basically nothing. So my advice, excuse me, my advice is work with product users. Work with product users. I have done all of these things, and both of these did not work out for me. And in general, of the non-technical founders that I know and who've done all of this, the consensus is a product studio is the best way forward. A product studio is essentially much more holistic, and they know how to work with non-technical founders because that is what they do. So they will have developers, they will have a designer, and they will have some kind of project manager who will be able to work with you to basically translate your business metrics into product metrics. But I would say, don't just hire a product studio and just be like, oh, I hired them, they're just going to solve all my problems. No, I would still say, I would obviously say take my course, but even if you're not going to take my course, at least listen to the podcast, learn some stuff. Don't just outsource all your ideas and all your success to people. That never works. You do want to come to them already ready and prepped as a good co-creator. Okay, final thing. When you are, okay, so this is the book, but I'm just going to tell you. So, final thing, when you are hiring product studios, have the same approach to them, have the same approach to hiring as you would to hiring somebody else who is doing a job that's important that you don't know how to do. Okay, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. Stop share. Perfect. So essentially, if you're going to be hiring a lawyer, for example, what would you do? You would look for recommendations from people who have actually completed the kind of transaction you're looking for. So if you are buying a house and you're looking for a lawyer, you're going to go to your friend who bought a house and ask them for what lawyer they used. You're not just going to, ideally, you wouldn't just randomly look on the internet. Even when you do start looking on the internet and when you do find that person, you need to see what clients have they worked with. Again, with the lawyer, if this person has only represented clients that are buying stately homes and you're buying an ex-council flat, that lawyer might not be the relevant person for you. It doesn't, it's not a judgment, it's just they might not be the relevant person for you. Always look for case studies of who that product team has worked with. So always make sure that the products that that company has built have some kind of similarity to yours. And again, in the book, I actually give you examples of product teams essentially that are either recommended by me or by non-technical founders, but also why they're recommended. So what is useful about them, but essentially always look for, okay, is the product that they have made or are their clients do they have any similarities to me? And also speak to those clients, get in touch with those clients. I remember I worked with one company that was fantastic at some things and they were really terrible at other things. And I spoke to some of their clients and they were like, yeah, they're only really good at ideation and just kind of giving you the first fire and the first ideas, but they're really terrible at following through. And so I realized, okay, I will go to them if I just need some kind of like sparks of genius, but these are not going to be the people that I have on retainer. And this is what I learned literally because my experience with them was a bit iffy. So I spoke to, literally, I just found somebody on LinkedIn who worked at a client company of theirs, and I just asked them. And for that reason, they're not in the ebook. All right. We've slightly gone over. I'm going to stop talking now. We can allow 1 or 2 questions, but I do know that we're running over. So does anybody want to ask me anything that is related to this? Or do you want to just compliment my new hair, which is also acceptable? Oh, okay. I'm just gonna, awesome. Hey, Monica, I have allowed you to talk. Monica, can you hear me? Can you?
Hello?
Oh, yes. Hi. Hi. Yes, Monica. Nice to meet you.
Hello. Nice to meet you. I'm from Arizona, United States.
Fabulous. I used to live in Chicago.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, pretty close. A little warmer here. So my question is, I love your hair, by the way.
Thank you.
Love your bang. And you gave a little examples of some successful business, I guess, techs, non-technical experts. I wanted to know, and perhaps because this is all new to me, to share a little bit more about your background of startups that you've been able to successful from idea, concept to application.
Yeah. So we that was the first slide that we had. So literally, I am a non-technical founder, and but also apart from me, there are lots of examples of successful non-technical founders on Tech For Non-Techies. So my example is one example, but there are lots of. It's important that you learn not just from me, but from the other examples on Tech For Non-Techies. Oh, hang on. So I started my career working in the media in London. And then I worked in finance in a private equity firm. And then I went to business school at Chicago Booth, so University of Chicago. And that's when I started a fashion tech company. So we basically, I had to go from idea to having an iPhone app and a website. And we co-created algorithms and hired product teams and worked with a technical lead and raised money and did all of that. And that's how Tech For Non-Techies was born. And that's because essentially I started writing about what I was learning as a non-technical person getting into the tech world, because I found that there are a lot of people who want to do that, but are not going to go and get a degree in computer science, or are not going to go and completely retrain as a developer or as a product manager, because you don't need to do that. I mean, you can do that, but you don't have to do that. There are lots of other ways. So if it's completely new to you, I would say welcome. But I would say, like, if it's completely new to you, if you listen to podcasts, listen to the Tech For Non-Techies podcast, which is on Spotify and on Apple. So it's literally the same name, Tech For Non-Techies. See what resonates with you, because there are lots of different ways to get into the tech world. Being a founder is one of them, but it's not the only way. Like, it's probably the most risky and probably the most expensive way. That's like, you don't have to do that to yourself. You can also transition into tech via other means, like product management is another way. So listen to the podcast, see what resonates. If any of this sounds interesting, then our next free session is going to be in March, and it's going to go through that technical production process. I'm not sure if you were there, but essentially we talked about the technical production process being a circular one, and that's what we cover in the course. Right. Hope that helps.
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so I've got a couple more questions. So I'm going to take both of them, and then I'm going to let you guys go, because then I've got other calls. Okay, so I've got Ella asking, what is the most common mistake when hiring teams? Hi, Ella. Ella was one of my first ever students in the olden days, before I changed my hair and before we had the friggin' COVID. Hi, it's so nice to see you, Ella. Okay, most common mistake when hiring teams. So I would say the biggest thing that I've seen and also that I've done myself is that we don't hire product teams, we hire development shops. So really, people, if you're a non-technical founder, go for a product studio, go for somebody who is go for a team that is going to give you some kind of product management support. They don't have to give you a full-time product manager, but some kind of product management support. And when they give you, when essentially they know that you're a non-technical founder, so they're going to give you the whole team. They're going to give you a product or slash project manager. They will give you a designer and they'll give you developers, and also that they will have patience and understanding in essentially things that you don't know. Because one of the best things that I've learned from the team, the team that I do recommend, they're actually called Evil Martians. One of the best things that I learned from them is how to do all of this. And the reason why they could teach me, and they really did teach me. So like I was getting so much more for my money than just development. Like I was actually learning how to manage a product. And the reason why they knew how to do that is because they have successfully worked with other non-technical founders. So they knew how, essentially they knew where the gaps in my market, in my knowledge would be. And they never made me feel stupid about me not knowing some stuff. So don't just go for people who are admired by developers, go for people who are admired, who work with non-technical founders. Okay, so I hope that helps, Ella. Okay, so Borna is asking, do you have a recommendation for finding designers? So I would say that it's basically very, very similar. If you can start working with a product studio or a designer from a product studio right from the start, then I would do that. It can be expensive, so you don't necessarily want to do that. Okay. Literally, there is a process in the ebook that talks through, but I'll tell you some of the things that you need to know. One is you need to make sure that they're a user experience designer. So you make sure that that's what they say they are. It's called UX, because design is a term like engineering. So there are lots of people who say they do design and they do design, but it's just not going to be relevant for what you are doing. You need somebody who's going to demonstrate empathy and who's going to be really in the head of your user, not somebody who's going to be making a design that just appeals to them. That's really important. You'll only find that out essentially when you interview them and when you see their portfolio. Somebody who's a designer and is just focused on graphic design, that's not relevant for you. Somebody who's only focused on creating their taste, somebody who's acting more like an artist, that's also not going to be relevant for you. You're looking for somebody who has created apps and sites before and who has worked in this production process, which is this circular production process, which means their designs have been used, their designs have been analyzed, and they've had to change their designs in response to user feedback. Okay, hang on. That basically means that they have to have a thick skin. Having a thick skin for a designer is super important. Another thing in terms of how to actually hire them, again, I wouldn't use Upwork. I wouldn't use any of those random platforms. I would speak to people who have achieved what you want to achieve and ask them how they did it. So, for example, I can tell you one thing that I did that worked. I did lots of things that didn't work, but I hired a product. My first ever hire was a studio of designers. So they didn't have developers. It wasn't a product studio because I needed to get a prototype out first. It was a studio of just designers. And the app that I was making at the time, it was a fashion app. So it needed to really focus on beauty and design, but also had to have a strong commercial element, and it had to have a strong content element. The company that I worked with, they created apps for Channel 4, which is one of the biggest broadcasters in the UK, and they created the app for Tesco, which is, I think, the largest supermarket in the UK. So that's commerce and that's content. And they also won a bunch of awards. And when I'd met the designers, I knew that they were empathetic and
that they were the right people. Getting the money to pay them, that's a whole other story, because they were so freaking expensive that I needed to raise money to pay them in the first place. But then the prototype they created for me was so good, it allowed me to raise more money than I expected later on. So what I'm saying here is that a good designer is worth investing in. Even if you don't have the money to invest in them, find the people you really want to work with, and then you can find money somehow, like raise money to work with them. Literally, I was like, I want to work with these people. This is why I want to work with them. This is why they're so amazing. This is how much it's going to cost. And investors invested in that proposition. But definitely design is super important. So make sure that you're working with people who have created the thing, who have created the kind of things you want to create. And skimping on design is just not something that I would recommend, because even if your code is perfect, but nobody understands how to use your product because the design is completely unintuitive, your money will be wasted. I hope that helps. Okay, so was there anything else? All right, my God, we've really gone over. I'm just going to take that as a sign of my popularity. All right, well, look out for emails from me, and we've got some interesting things coming up on the Tech For Non-Techies podcast. And if it floats your boat, get the ebook, but if it doesn't float your boat, totally fine. Our next live free class is in March, and it's the Introduction to Tech for Non-Technical Founders. So come to that, learn some more. All right. Ciao, my darlings. Have a fab day. Bye.